Let's open up the Black Series Archive 6-inch scale figure of Grogu. Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it. Hello there, thanks for visiting Varykino. The past couple of days I've been opening up some slightly older Star Wars figures that are just new to me because I've recently picked them up from a toy store that was closing down. One of my favorite places to pick up Star Wars figures like the Black Series is from the local department chain The Warehouse, and sadly a branch of that here in Auckland is shutting down, which meant that they were clearancing out their toy store section for half price, and sales like that don't happen very often here in New Zealand. So I picked up all of the Star Wars figures that I was missing from my collection at half off, which included this particular Grogu figure. Now I'm quite sentimental about the Mandalorian in terms of the Black Series line because I credit the Mandalorian series for getting me fully into collecting the Black Series, and I'm trying to add as many figures from the Mandalorian to my Black Series collection as I can. Now I know this is a slightly older figure, as with all of the Archive series. These are reissued figures, but as luck would have it, I never found this particular figure during its original release, so I was really excited when this reissue Archive version showed up locally here in New Zealand. I didn't necessarily want to pay full price for it because he is kind of small, but thankfully my patience paid off and I picked him up for half price, so I'm really excited to open him up. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, I'll take Grogu and all of his accessories out of the packaging so we can take a closer look, but first let's take a quick look at the packaging. Taking a quick look at a couple of different packaging design styles by Hasbro, something about the Archive line really does look a little bit more simplified, like they're designed to be no frills, simply a reissue designed for opening. When I think about the colors and the graphics on some of the other toy lines like the mainline Black Series and the Vintage Collection 3.75 inch, this one just looks sort of no frills. So for my personal experience, I find these ones great for opening, especially if I was never able to find the original ones. It's kind of funny because I think of backing cards with bubbles as being perfect for keeping carded, but when it comes to Black Series, I much prefer the boxes, and I'm curious to know how many other collectors feel the same way. While the packaging style for the main Black Series line is of course generally boxes, for the Archive reissued line we have a backing card with a clear bubble here. The backing card is predominantly black, but we do have a panel of light grey in behind the bubble here, which extends to the right side where we can see the text Archive printed there on the side. We have a couple of interesting cutouts, the one at the top of course being the hanger cutout. We also have an angular cutout against the left edge, which mirrors the cut-off corner of the clear plastic bubble here in the front. The character name on this backing card is down the side. We can see this one is titled simply as Grogu, and we have a really nice clear bubble that takes up the most of the front of the card here, where we can see Grogu and his many accessories. I can't wait to open them up. We have a small cardboard insert here in the front bubble with a black and white line art there of Grogu, and I think that the choking hazard note on this one is kind of interesting, as well as saying it contains small parts. It also notes the containing a small ball. Of course, Grogu has his small little gear knob as an accessory on this one. Kind of interesting that it is noted there as a choking hazard separate to the other small parts. Moving on to the back now, of course we've got that same black color for the whole back of the backing card here, and that picture from that front bubble insert is here on the back as well, a bit larger where we can really see some of the cool line art details there. Now of course the Archive line is for reissued Black Series figures, which is fantastic for collectors like me when I could never find the original release of this figure. So I was really excited to see him reissued in the Archive line because Grogu is such a central important character in the Mandalorian series, and he's generally included alongside the Mandalorian himself, but this version includes some different sculpting and different accessories that I can't find in those other versions. Now we can see the packaging of the original version here. We have that side angle art there with Grogu and his hover Pram and all of those small accessories. I think it's interesting that we have an asterisk here, and if we look down it notes that it is not available, which I think is interesting considering the note clearly says that this was from 2022. Now of course we also have a little bit of a blurb here introducing the character of Grogu, not like anyone buying this doesn't already know. It reads, "A mysterious child pursued by bounty hunters on behalf of Imperial interests. The foundling Grogu found protection with the Mandalorian Din Djarin." So kind of a cute little introduction, not too spoilery, but it's kind of fun that they still have to explain who Grogu is. The rest of the backing card there is just very small copyright information. This one here is about the original figure not being available, so we've got a very small section here for the copyright. When I think about the vintage collection backing cards, the copyright information takes up a large portion of the back. It's interesting that technically they can kind of make it quite small, though of course with Black Series we do also have this extra panel here for the barcode and more of that information. I kind of wish sometimes they could sort of include that in a little bit of an insert so that the backing cards for the vintage collection aren't taken up with so much text. But anyway, that's a different product line. I am really excited to finally have this version of this figure in my collection. There are some really interesting differences with this figure compared to other releases, and of course he goes through many hover prams, and I don't have this one in Black Series form, so I'm really excited to open this one up and get them all out and check out those details. So now I have Grogu and his many accessories out of the packaging so we can take a closer look, and of course I'm going to start off with Grogu himself. Now there have been many versions of Grogu released in the Black Series line, but out of the ones that I have personally in my collection, this one is quite unique in the fact that he is in a sitting position. He's normally in kind of a standing position. Of course we generally don't see his feet in action figure form, so this is quite a cute different version here. So he's actually just a little bit shorter than the other versions, of course, because you can kind of see the way that his little jacket is sculpted, like he is sitting cross-legged in a little bit of perhaps a meditation pose there, particularly with his arms out in the position that they are. So of course, because of his small size, he has very limited articulation, as you would expect. I'm sure the original puppet doesn't actually have that much movement either, but as expected, we've got movement around at the head. I don't think he's going to have much in the way of a front and back movement, mostly just side to side. He does have a bit of flex with his ears, which is kind of fun. He's just a little bit soft and flexible there. He is hitting on the high collar of his jacket there, so his ears are kind of grinding a little bit, particularly when I get to this point here. So it's not a free movement, but it's there. We can move his head around a little bit. Now the main other articulation point is with his arms. We can raise his arms up and down. Again, we're kind of going to hit a few points there. Of course, he's going to be able to hit his ears, and it kind of hits down here. If I push his arm down, it's hitting on his little folded knees there, so it's not going to swing all the way around, but we've probably got about as much motion as we need from this little guy. So I'm going to try and see. Okay, so he does have articulation at the wrist. I wasn't sure if we were going to have something quite as small as wrist articulation on this particular figure, but if I grip his fingers, I can rotate his hands around, which I'm hoping will help because we've got some very small accessories. Now he's only got 3 fingers. I'm not sure too much of a grip position we'll be able to achieve with this particular figure, particularly this hand here. Even if I spin it around, this hand is almost flat. His fingers are splayed out. This one has perhaps a little bit more of a grip shape, but they're just so small. I'm not sure that we're really going to get this particular Grogu figure to hold on to anything, but I'll certainly give it a try. So again, this one also kind of hits there on his legs when I sort of move his arms around, but I can actually get pretty good rotation in sort of the up to down positions there. The underside, he doesn't have any sculpted feet. Some kind of have just very subtle feet outlines there. We've just simply got the Hasbro Lucasfilm copyright stamps there on the underside. He does have painted elements, of course. His jacket is pretty much sort of that beigey sort of caramel plastic there with painted elements around the collar. Generally pretty good paint there. We've maybe got one tiny little nick there in the paint job just up there, but generally pretty straight. And of course we also have paint around the cuffs. Now this is where we get just a little bit off center with the sort of paint lines. We've got a little bit of paint just extending beyond the sculpting line there on this particular sleeve, and again on this one we've got just a little bit extending beyond the sculpting lines here. But as I mentioned at the start, I picked this one up half price while a store was closing down. There was just one lucky last package of this guy, so I didn't have others to compare to. But as I mentioned, the face, that is the main important part for me. I can kind of, I can pose the arms, I can sort of rotate them around. I'm kind of can hide any tiny little paint flaws with his jacket sleeves there. It is the face that I am really fascinated by. because Grogu's kind of gone through a little bit of a design change. Looking at some of the older figures, some of them have really obvious white painting for the hairs, which kind of looks odd. It needs to be really soft and fine. So when we look at this one, it's so tiny, it's hard to focus on it. There is the tiniest little digital printing, sort of almost like little white dots on the top of his forehead. We don't have that sort of those brush strokes that look really obvious and sort of weird. There is a really tiny sort of sculpting detail. It just looks like maybe sort of somebody's like dragged a brush through the original mold just to kind of get those really fine sort of hairlines that will show up in the final plastic toy. And there's just a really fine digital printing here on the top. It's just showing up. And I like that. It's got a sort of almost just a wisp of hair, not actual painted lines. And some of the earlier versions also had a little bit of a googly eye nature. And the fact that he sort of had white around the outside of his eyes, it was kind of a bit uncanny. I think Grogu looks a lot more accurate and a lot more cuter when he has just the round black eyes, kind of like Funko Pop vinyl characters, just the sort of round circular eyes. It gives him a very cute appearance. So this one I like. We don't have those weird white touches to the eyes. He does have some very fine printing just around the eyes to give it a little bit of sort of a pinkish tone that kind of blends into his cheeks there. And we also have a little bit of that pinkish sort of beigey sort of skin tone color coming in on his ears there as well. So just some really nice touches so he doesn't look just like a flat green plastic there. The hands don't have any additional paint that I can see. We don't have sort of fingernail details or anything like that. They are simple cast green plastic there. Nice match for the head. But in terms of some of the Black Series Grogu figures I've seen, I really like this one. I think it is a cute sitting down pose, which works for the hover pram. Most of the figures come in a standing up pose. So if you put them in the hover pram, it kind of looks a bit odd that he's standing up in it. I think it looks more correct that he would be sitting down while in his pram. And also because, of course, as he progresses through the storyline, he's learning to use the Force. So I like the sort of sitting down nature. And of course, I've already got quite a few standing up ones. It's nice to have a bit of a variety here. So really nice figure. He's not really too much in terms of posing. I'm not going to get really much difference out of him. A simple turn of the head's not going to create too much, but perhaps we'll test out how well he can hold some of his small accessories with his tiny little hands there. So very cute, really nicely painted, particularly on the face there. Really like that. So let's go through the many accessories that come with this little guy. So first off, we have a clear stand to create the sort of hovering effect for the hover pram. It came like this in the packaging. This upright stick section here is permanently attached to the bottom part. It looks like it is made as one piece. This is not designed to be removed. And we have just a simple, slightly wider section here at the top. We're just going to be using tension through a peg hole on the bottom of the hover pram. So not too sort of technical on that one. You don't need to worry about sort of assembling this. But certainly would worry about potentially snapping this one off, because then you're going to have your hover pram on the ground. So the main part of the hover pram comes in one piece. We can see that sort of a hexagon shape there to attach it on to the peg hole. It's actually surprisingly heavy. I thought for sort of like a hollow object it would be kind of light, but this feels almost like it's like a cast solid plastic. There's a different thickness to it. You can see sort of the interior sort of bed padded surface, of course it all being plastic, not actual foam or anything like that. It's actually fairly thick. It's a raised sort of bottom surface in here. So this feels like this is just solid plastic between my two fingers here as I squeeze. Now, of course, we've got the sort of articulated lid here. We can see that we do have a section here to kind of completely close it in. But taking a quick look at it, this top sort of two section here is permanently attached to it. I can see where it has been attached. I can just see the difference in the paint line. There's just that very thin stripe of white where the paint isn't fully sort of joined up there, but it looks like I can make out just a very small amount of clear glue residue at the sides here. So I'm pretty certain that this is not intended to be taken off, that this is Hasbro assembling this as was supposed to be one piece, and it is the rest of the lid that is the sort of removable part there. So of course it is a toy. We've got some, you know, parts to it that aren't technically accurate. We kind of have these sort of attachment points and a little bit of sort of a part here where we're going to clip in at the top. Now when it comes to this style of attachment, with these kind of little slots and sort of these ones with the little ridges on them that kind of click in with tension. I get nervous about clicking these into place because I'm worried that something might break when trying to remove it. So I'll test this lid section out a little while later. We can see it's just a one-piece plastic with some fun details here. We'll take a quick look at the paint job of it because he has so many versions of his hover prod. This one is very white with a bright orange stripe that is weathered in places, and we've kind of got this dark silver metallic finish that's speckled over like battle damage. So it's a really interesting one. Under certain lights, it looks like a dark grey, but when I look at it up close, it is a metallic finish to these paint scratcher surfaces. And they're pretty consistent over the most of it. We've got a little bit of a clean stripe here, and on the underside, of course, we don't really have anything there. But if I just sort of balance it here, you can kind of see the overall effect of sort of all the battle damage and the orange striping. I like the weathering. It looks really cool. Even though it's a very white plastic, I like the fact that it looks sort of a battle damage with that metallic sort of scratching all over it. Now looking inside, we've got a sort of a mid-tone orange sort of for the details on the interior, and we've got some metallic silver sort of details here in the back. We've almost like wires or little knobs sort of detail work there in the back, and that color extends a little bit up and inside the sort of articulated hood section there, and then it is white for the most part, which matches with the white of the extra lid there. So let's just test to see how Grogu looks sitting in this. So of course he's in a sitting position. Just going to quickly move his arms up because they do get in the way a little bit. So if I sit him in it, because the bottom surface is curved, there is a little bit of a gap underneath his flat bottom there and the curve of the hover pram. So if I turn him to the side, he looks a lot more sort of proper because he's sort of sitting a little bit more flatter in there. And personally, I think he just looks really cute sitting there side on. I think the pram, particularly with this kind of egg shape, it's not a ball, it is more of sort of like an oval sort of egg shape. I do like its shape and design from the side, so I personally think that this is how I'm going to be having my Grogu sitting in his hover pram rather than sort of sitting front forward there. Just looks a little bit awkward. I know I'm probably not going to be looking straight down, but knowing that he's not really sitting flat means that I feel like he's going to sort of wobble around in there because his surface is just flat and the interior of this is not flat. Kind of interesting they didn't actually make like a flat panel or anything for him to sit on. They've kept it accurate in there, so if he is not posed in it, it doesn't look odd with having a flat surface in there. But let's go and quickly put this one on its sort of support stand here. Just a quick push in there, goes in quite nicely. Feels very sturdy. That's not going to just randomly fall off. And if we take a look at the balance, it feels very sturdy. I don't feel like this is going to tip over. It's got a nice wide base there, so it's not going to just tip over because it does feel quite top heavy, but it's very sturdy, which I quite like. I don't like the idea of any of my Star Wars toys tipping over, so that feels really nice. So I will test the lid in a little bit, but I want to move on to these other small items. So it looks like we've got 4 items here, but there's actually 5. We have the little silver packet here of his blue cookies, which is really tiny. Then we have his mythosaur skull sort of Mandalorian symbol necklace here. We have a one-eyed little frog, very, very small. And then here, I've kind of put them together because I'm afraid of losing them. If I put them in my hands, I'll try and show you. We have the silver gear knob. It is so small, the camera can't focus on it. And his little soup cup. So at the moment I'm using his little soup cup, his little bowl, to hold on to that little gear knob because it is so tiny I can barely hold on to it and I don't want to lose it. I think it's interesting that on the back of the backing card where they picture the original release of this figure, it shows the frog, the little ball and the little cup in a clear plastic packaging inside the main bubble of the backing card. And so if you look at one of the earlier releases of Grogu, Grogu when he was still called the Child, we can see that same similar little interior capsule that Hasbro has provided to store the accessories of the frog, the little cup, and the gear knob. And I think it's interesting that when we come to this archive reissue version, we no longer get this little clear box to store the small accessories in. I guess Hasbro's just like, we've given it to you a few times, you're on your own now. So I guess I'm going to have to find a small container, because there's no way these small accessories are going to be safe just sitting on my display shelf next to Grogu. They're going to get lost. They're going to get, just up in the air somehow. I feel like just a slight breeze is going to take these things away because they are so small. So because of Grogu's unique little hands, I'm not sure how much he's actually going to hold these things. Like, I get, it doesn't really need to hold the frog. The frog is a creature. It can sit by itself. Perhaps you want to put it on a tiny bit of string and kind of have it sort of force floating in the air like he does in one of the episodes. I would love for him to hold the packet of his little blue cookies, but this is actually quite round compared to his little hands. I'm not sure. You can see there, it's too big to fit in his hand as a grasp. And because his arms are so short, he can't really sort of hug it. I'm thinking the best you could do is kind of get it sort of balanced with a bit of tension to kind of hold it against his body, but that's not really going to be very secure there. I know that you could probably get in some sort of blue tack or perhaps even glue if you're feeling brave to kind of get Grogu to perhaps hold any one of these accessories. If you are fortunate enough to be able to purchase multiples of this version of Grogu, you could, be adventurous and create some poses with some sort of more permanent attachment fixture methods there. I do like having some small accessories like this, but at the same time, I do get frustrated when I don't have any way of sort of attaching them to the character. Like characters that have an abundance of accessories, and then they've only got so many hands or holsters to sort of hold everything. And I'm like, well, now what do I do with all the spares? I like the options for poses, but with Grogu, he doesn't have posing options. I can't get him to hold these things, so they're just kind of bonuses, like having the spare Lego pieces when you finish building. They're not really useful once you've sort of opened it and checked everything out. So I like these little accessories, but I'm not really sure what to do with them. I'm terrified of trying to make him hold the little knob. I almost wish it was kind of like on some versions of, say, the character Darth Vader, where you can sort of remove the hand to do sort of, when he's been battle damaged and things like that. I kind of wish that we had perhaps two hands of Grogu, one with the sort of the sculpted ball, because as you can see, his claw does hold this very, very tiny accessory, but there's no way that is going to stay there unless I put him in a cabinet behind glass where breeze or a gentle knock is not going to send this thing flying. I guess if you're brave, again, you could glue this in place. I do think this one is even though it's the smallest, absolute tiniest little accessory I think I've ever seen included in a Star Wars figure, it does actually really fit the character. It looks right, but I kind of wish that we got it as like two hands. You could swap them out so that you just don't have the issue of losing this thing. The only way I would feel secure about him displaying this is if I have him behind glass, or I simply glue this on, because I'm gonna lose it. And I know it's tiny. I could probably get a ball bearing. Makes me think of some of those Jedi action figures that Hasbro experimented back with in sort of the prequel era, where they had very small magnets in the hand and then they had metal lightsaber hilts. That was a really fun era. I kind of like the force effect of them just sort of grabbing their lightsabers. And I was like, maybe if he had a tiny, tiny magnet in his hand and that was like metal or something like that, so it would grip with the force, as it were, he could sort of hold it. That would be fun. But again, his hands are very small. I don't know if it's even logistically really that feasible to put a magnet in his hands. But anyway, again, with the cup, there's just no way for him to really hold this thing. It's awkward. He cannot get his hands, in the show, he's kind of holding it like a sippy cup type thing with two hands. He cannot get his hands close enough together to actually hold any item with both hands. He's just simply not articulated to do that. He doesn't have elbows or sort of any sort of way to kind of get his hands close enough together to hold it. And he doesn't have enough of a grasping sort of pinch with his fingers to hold on to that. Now, the one item that could be useful is his mythosaur skull necklace. So you can see we have the little skull there painted in silver. It doesn't have sort of gaps between the horns. It's all sculpted as one piece because we're taking a really small detail here. And then we've got a black sort of rubbery section here. Now, this kind of rubber that Hasbro uses, it's not really like an elastic band. I'm not really going to stretch it out. It's just flexible. And you can see that I might, with a bit of experimentation, get it over his ears. But I think the best way to get Grogu to wear this particular accessory is to pop his head off. And I might try that later on, because I do think it would be interesting to have him wear this. You know, I think it's a significant little accessory. And I do think the curve on this is designed to sit around his neck and hang down at the front. So if I do manage to pop his head off and get this necklace on, I will insert a couple of pictures there to show you how that looks. But I'm always a little bit nervous about popping accessory pieces off character figures in terms of like heads and helmets, hands. Sometimes I do appreciate Hasbro giving us those options, but it doesn't stop me from feeling anxious about doing so, because of course I don't want to wreck my toys. But he looks really cool. I think it's fun that we get these many accessories with it. Do they really add up to be the same value as a full-size Black Series 6-inch figure? I don't really know. He is an important character, of course, if you're collecting all of your Black Series in their boxes. I think it was really neat that Hasbro did release him separately, so he was part of that lineup. But to be honest, I am glad that I waited and got him at half price. Certainly makes this a lot of an easier decision, because when I look at the amount of plastic I am getting here, this feels less than some vintage collection 3.75-inch figures. I feel like I've gotten more plastic with that cheaper scale, the smaller scale Star Wars figures, than I do for the value here. And I got him for cheaper than a vintage collection figure, so I feel like the price I paid was fair for him. Half price, not the full price. Here in New Zealand, these ones retail for 45 New Zealand dollars. I got him for half price, so you know, 22.50-ish. And I think that that is fair for what is here. That's, I don't know that I necessarily want to pay full price, but I do like that Hasbro has re-released this. It was clearly popular. If it ever turned up here in New Zealand, it was gone in the blink of an eye, because I was never able to find it. So I can't even confirm if it was ever available here in New Zealand. Like one of the other Black Series figures that came out in the same wave of this particular archive release, included the Luke Skywalker Imperial Light Cruiser figure. Now that one I know for certain was never available here in New Zealand. So there were 2 figures from the Mandalorian series that were in this particular archive line that hit New Zealand a couple of months ago. Super excited to get those really harder to find figures for my collection. Not that I need another version of Grogu. I do like the fact that he's sitting in this version, but it's more to do with the hover pram, I think, because he goes through these different versions. It feels very distinct. You want to match up the right hover pram with sort of the right scenes, because the Mandalorian, of course, goes through some different armors and different sort of scenes and things like that, and just the characters that you put around them to kind of create different scenes from different seasons. So without sort of locking a Grogu in there, let's just quickly check the final step of this, and which is clicking on the lid for this hover pram. Just going to quickly take that stand off so I can maneuver this a little bit better. So of course we've got 3 attachment points, one on either side, kind of close to the edge, and that one longer one here at the front. So with because this one actually has a slot here at the front, I'm going to start by sort of putting that into place, and then we'll see how firmly this is going to click into place. Okay, that is quite tight, and I'm wondering how easily that's going to pop off. Okay, so maybe if I try the other, I'll try doing the sides first and see how well. No, it definitely needs to go in at the front first, so I'm gonna, it's not clicking all the way flush down like I thought. I thought it might snap into place with that sort of loud click, and then it would be a struggle to get it off. You can kind of see the lip here. It's not sort of sitting completely flush with it. I don't know if it's sort of designed to. You can just sort of see the white around that sort of hinge section there. But yeah, that's not actually too hard to get off, so I'm quite relieved about that. It is just kind of holding there with tension. It's not snapping into place where it feels like you're going to put a lot of tension on the plastic to get it open again, so I'm very glad about that. It feels secure when it's in place, like it's not going to sort of fly off if I knock it. If you see, sort of shake it around, that doesn't feel like it's going to come off, so I'm glad about that. I'm always a little bit nervous when it comes to these certain toys. They don't necessarily warn you that once you click them into place, that's it. They never come apart. And so I'm always just a little bit wary of putting together toys where it might be a bit risky to try and sort of pull them apart again. I would expect Hasbro would make this so that you could swap it backwards and forwards, but just when it comes to this type of attachment point with that sort of ridge, sometimes they click into place and you can risk snapping this off while trying to remove it. But on this one, it looks like that is good and easy to remove. There is just a tiny bit of flex to it just because it's an open surface. It's not really a rubbery surface one there, but overall, a really cool figure. I'm liking the accessories. Still not exactly sure where I'm going to put all of these tiny, tiny accessories. And I guess if I was a little bit braver with glue, I could be quite experimental with some of the poses. I'm definitely going to have some fun taking some photos of him with all of his little accessories though. I think that that's always a little bit of a fun element. I think that's what Hasbro tries to sort of facilitate with giving us so many of these tiny accessories is, you know, we can take some cool photos, build some cool scenes, but when it comes to long-term display with the rest of your Black Series figures, these are probably going to go away in a little plastic container or a little Ziploc bag or something like that because I don't want to lose them. I'm quite particular about not, you know, just throwing away or getting rid of extra accessories that I personally don't need. I tend to keep them all, so they're going to be stored safely away. I just wish that I could get Grogu to hold that little silver knob because I feel like that's possibly the most prominent and sort of important accessory for him personally throughout the show because it's that emotional attachment to Din Djarin that he wants his knob. We see him holding it even, you know, series later, he still has it. So I kind of wish it was a little bit more secure in his hand because I think that's actually the coolest despite being the absolute tiniest little accessory I've ever seen. So this was really fun. Of course, he doesn't actually have too much articulation and not even that much paint work to really talk about there, but he's just so cute. He's so important for the Mandalorian series, and I'm really happy that I've got this particular version with this particular hover pram that I can add to my Black Series collection. Interestingly, this has got to be one of the first versions of Grogu in the Black Series line that I've actually opened. I do own quite a few, but I haven't opened them up yet. When I got started into Black Series collecting, I was keeping most of my figures in their boxes. So now I'm getting brave and I'm opening them all up. And this one being a recent purchase, I was really excited to just get stuck straight in and open him up. And he looks really cute. I love that sitting down position. I think it just makes him even shorter and cuter. And I think the sitting position works really well for displaying inside a hover pram. Looks a little bit more accurate than him standing up in it. So all in all, a great figure. Very happy that I got it half price though. I will say that. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Star Wars Black Series figure and had a lot of fun checking out the details and the many, many accessories. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again very soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a Black Series fan, I've also opened up the Luke Skywalker Imperial Light Cruiser figure. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole Black Series unboxing playlist. This is the way.